The public domain is finally growing again for the first time in decades.
Yes. I would argue that Winnie the Pooh taking a killer turn wasn't to everybody's taste.
We're seeing a resurgence of sword and sorcery.
Did you see that article about the guy who got published pretending to be like a gender fluid Nigerian refugee?
There are multiple stories like that over the past few years, and I think it speaks to itself.
We have a problem where people are more familiar with the fantastical and the fake than they are with the genuine and the true.
The person who cracks the code on getting not just men to pick up books again, but children, both boys and girls, will make a mint. Because that's ultimately the big tragedy with publishing turning away from men the way they did. They'll find their entertainment elsewhere. If they're lucky, it'll be through video games. If we're unlucky, it'll be through Andrew Tate.
Hello and welcome to CultureScape, the show that interviews the geek creators and influencers who built nerd culture. I'm your host, Pischke, and today we're diving into the wild and unraveling world of book publishing, where 1 in 5 books from the Big Five sell fewer than 12 copies. With AI creeping in, Google and Amazon gaming the system, and romantasy dominating the store shelves, what future is left for authors and readers? To help us navigate this chaos, I'm joined by two sharp minds. We have today independent author C.S. Johnson and writer Shaun C.W. Korsgaard, current editor at Iron Age Media and former assistant editor at Baen Books Publishing. Welcome to the show, CJ and Shaun. Great to have you here today.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be someone that enjoys books. Last year we had the big trial with Penguin Random House Publishing, and that unleashed a treasure trove of all kinds of factoids that are kind of shocking. From the PRN trial, we found out that among all the titles that make money for the Big Five publishing houses, just 4% account for 60% of the profits. And the Big Five, they make up the market for, 90% of anticipated books, or about 60% of the market in total. And the majority of authors barely turn a profit. And 1 in 5 authors, when they publish books with the Big Five, they sell 12 books or less, which is crazy. That's so insane to me. So I really wanted to bring you both here today to talk about, because I'm like, what? How does an author even begin to hope to make a dent to sell books and get new readership? Let's go first with you, CJ.
Oh, so the question is, how do you hope to make an income? You just hope. It does seem like the numbers are stacked against people, but you can't really substantiate your hope unless you do nothing, unless you do something. So you have to do it anyway.
Shaun, you have lots of experience on the publishing side as well. What's it like being a publisher these days in the world of print media?
Oh boy, do I. So the funniest thing is, before I joined publishing, I worked in journalism, which is its own category of sinking ship. But unlike newspapers, I do think publishing can adjust and be saved if they're smart about the next few years. Obviously, we're in a big time transition, and there are a lot of adjustments from the author side, editor side, publisher side that need to be made. But if we play our cards smartly, there's a whole new century of publishing ahead of us with fortunes to be made.
What do you think of, and this is probably the most pressing issue that's on the front of people's minds, but the introduction of AI. Amazon is a great example of this. There's just so much AI slop that has just dominated the platform. And this seems to be something, at least for me, is like a huge turnoff. Like, it makes me more hesitant to try a new author, someone I never heard of. What are your experiences, both of you, with the impact of AI, and what do you think you're seeing on your ends of the issue? We'll go with Shaun first this time, and then CJ.
So there has been a long-standing issue within publishing that even before the introduction of AI is that since the Kindle era of publishing really began, is that it's been harder and harder for new authors to break in, where before, while it was never easy, it was easier than it is now. And a big problem with that is, even before AI really muddied the waters up is there is so much churn in digital publishing. For better or for worse, publishing used to play gatekeeper to who got to put books out. There was a level of quality and content that you could trust anytime you pick a book off a shelf. Kindle, anytime it's a roll of the dice, whether or not it's something brilliant, because there are some absolutely magnificent authors in self-publishing, digital publishing, outside of trad publishing, but there's a lot of utter slop as well. Stuff that they haven't even formatted the books properly. It looks like it was edited with a 5-year-old with a hatchet. But AI will make the problem a lot worse in that, like you said, there's just a lot of slop entering the field. But truthfully, there are two possibilities to this outcome. First is that readers decide they like slop, and a lot of authors and publishers will suffer. And the other is that we decide we want that human element, that human element matters, that art is not just content, but a part of the human soul, and that is worth pursuing. And that's the side I take with this, I hope. There are obviously some areas within publishing that AI could really be a help. Business models is an obvious application. But writing, artwork, I hope that people will still prefer the human side of things, because computers can do a lot, but they can't scratch that itch every writer or reader feels anytime they put a pen to paper or pick up a book.
CJ, as an author, I'm sure all this AI slop, all this low quality competition, I'm sure that puts added stress on the projects you want to take on. How is the threat of AI affecting you as an author and how you're approaching your publishing?
Honestly, when I first started getting like into the mainstream last year, I was kind of depressed by it. Now I'm kind of amused by it. Part of it is you've got to have a sense of humor to survive, I think. And then the other part of it is it really is kind of absurd in its way, because a lot of people like live in a fantasy world today of their own making. And I think I've said this on other podcasts, but it's like we have the unicorn problem, and that's what I call it. We grow up hearing so many fantastical stories that we forget that like horses are real, but unicorns are not. And in that sense, anyway, that maybe if you're in North Korea or Scotland, they're real. But we have a problem where people are more familiar with the fantastical and the fake than they are with the genuine and the true. So there is a possibility that they will enjoy their slop. I've actually compared this to getting married to someone and buying a sex doll.
Apt comparison.
Yes, you will get exactly what you want, and you'll know exactly what you're going to get going into things. With an actual marriage, though, it's like hard work, and there has to be a lot of grace, and there's a learning curve, and the authenticity of it is very intimidating for somebody who's like you kind of go in with like a leap of faith, but you're not sure how you're going to land yet.
It is interesting, one of you mentioned, how people could choose slop, Shaun. And, I think of this is what's happening with YouTube right now. A big problem with YouTube at the moment is that we've just had all this slop just invade YouTube. And it looks like the sad truth is that more people than not actually are okay with it and don't really care if it's AI generated or not. And that is always kind of the danger in these sort of things. However, I think to CJ's point, there is a 3-dimensional way to look at books and quality fiction and literature that AI will have a hard time replicating, at least right now. And there is an advantage there, but it's just so, like you were saying, Shaun, it was like already so hard to break into publishing and to get a foothold, like when in the intro I was referring to, where it's like one of five books sells 12 copies or less. I'm like, so how is someone supposed to break through?
Then that's even before like a lot of the traditional publisher friends that I have that have published through TradPub and they haven't met their like quota. A lot of them are blacklisted from publishing, with their contracts are denied and everything. So it's hard to break in, and then it's hard, like if you use up all your your one chance.
CJ touches on something that is and has always been one of the problems with trad publishing, in that it's very common for a new author to get a 3-book deal from one of the big trad publishers, and for whatever reason, if that book doesn't go exactly right, book 1 flops, book 2 underperforms, or let's say you have plans for bigger than a 3-book series and the public just doesn't buy it or pick it up in time. That too bad, so sad, maybe better luck with a different publisher. And it's that's always one of the hardest parts of working on the editorial side of things, is there are a lot of times where the publisher has to be the bad guy that says, "You're a fine person. I know you poured your heart and soul into this book, but you had the bad luck to have a book that dropped in 2020. We can't fix that." And the other side of things is that publishing is, even in the better times, a slow to adjust industry. And this is a rapidly changing landscape. The big one being marketing. That was one of the big things I did at Baen, is that I torched the old playbook on how to market, because it used to be back in the day a review in Publishers Weekly, or you could count on bookstores and librarians to push the book for you. Not so much anymore. I mean, I don't know how many of your viewers watching this have actually picked up a copy of Publishers Weekly in the past 10 years, but I assure you it's probably somewhere in the single digits. So these days, we are in a promotion landscape where podcasts, YouTubers, small-scale reviewers matter a lot more. So I built a marketing platform around that. And I like to think I was pretty relentless about that, wasn't I, Peter?
Yes, you were. You were, Shaun.
And the thing is, like, one of the authors Baen signed while I was working with them at I could work in publishing another 50 years, and I think Howard Andrew Jones getting his books published by Baen will be among my proudest achievements. He was a mid-lister at another publisher who, as CJ pointed out, had one of those deals that just didn't go the right way. Reliable mid-lister, they decided their resources should go somewhere else. He put in a book at Baen, I recommended they pick it up, and I worked with him step by step on marketing, and they sold. He did very well. The books were critically acclaimed. I mean, they've done very well for Baen as well. I mean, the tragedy with him is he died of brain cancer earlier this year. But there is a way publishers can market and place these books in a modern landscape, but it relies on doing things that they haven't done before.
One of the interesting things that it is a good question here, because we are now seeing even big players like Sanderson, writer of Mistborn and other novels. He's starting to leave establishment. He's gone more indie and more Kickstarter focused. And when you read like stats that came like from the PRN trial and what others have been saying about the book publishing industry, it's like 2% of the total revenue at any of these big publishers. These are the big guys. These are the big dogs. They're just spending 2% on marketing. That hearing that stat, it makes me think, well, wait, if I'm an author, like, are the advantages of going with one of the big publisher really worth it in the end? Because if these big players are moving away from the big five and they're wanting to go indie, maybe the fall of publishing industry as we know it isn't such a big deal if independent picks up the slack. Or is that a totally unrealistic view? I want to hear what you guys have to say. We'll first go here with CJ.
I don't think it's a totally unrealistic view, because that's pretty much what I deal with. It doesn't actually cost a lot of money if you know what you're doing to publish a book. I mean, like, it's still like a big chunk of change, but I mean, like, when you when I hear somebody gets like a $500 million advance, I'm like, wow. I don't I don't have the right political connections for that kind of stuff.
So what is the advantage currently for an author to go independent versus establishment now, considering all the changes that are happening, Shaun?
Control. That's the big thing. You get more control if you are the one running the show, or if you work with a small press where you have a greater voice. The disadvantage is, of course, that you have to wear a lot of hats that otherwise you might not need to. For example, the bane of many small authors, independent authors, small presses is editorial. The advantage to working with an established publisher is I've gotten the production side of things to run like a well-oiled machine. They know how to edit a book. They know how to punch up a book. One of those things working at Baen that was miraculous to watch is Toni Weisskopf, who runs the company. She can look at a manuscript and go over it with a pen in a way that you learn more about storytelling in an afternoon than you could pick up from a college course. And you don't get that independently unless you can find a very good freelance copy editor, and they do exist. Likewise, the production standpoint, you can trust HarperCollins or Simon & Schuster to produce a professional, good-looking hardcover book. This is nothing against the small press people, but a lot of times, those flimsy paperbacks look like they came off an Amazon print press. And that's something that maybe we'll see adjust more as production capabilities pick up in small presses. But the advantage to the TradPub side is that institutional knowledge, and they handle all the stuff that takes an author away from writing. Because that is the disadvantage I've seen a lot of these independent authors, no matter how successful, is that they have to be the master of multiple skills. They have to know how to market, they have to know how to interview, they have to know how to produce, they have to know how to handle Facebook advertising, and they still have to be able to turn in books on time, on top of everything else. And there are a lot of authors that just want to be able to write, and that's why I hope hybrid models you see more and more. Like, yes, Sanderson is great for exploring that himself. He has his own people with Dragonsteel Press, as well as the fine folks at Tor Books. You see a good friend of mine, the author Christopher Rocchio, publishes his Sun Eater books through DAW, as well as his own stuff through Patreon and small presses and collector's editions he runs through a small press. Has some other books and short story collections here. A lot of hats and a lot of pools. There are multiple ways of doing things now, which hopefully, if the AI doesn't just sink everybody, will work to the advantage of up-and-coming authors.
For what it's worth, I do think the industrial knowledge is probably the big selling point for TradPub. They are very well connected. They have their like their own brand of like getting author blurbs and doing a lot of team up marketing, more strategic things that we've seen over the years pop up. So I won't disagree with anything you said there. So
I don't know. If I can add on to what CJ pointed out, that is actually one for any independent or small press authors out there. The one area that a lot of these guys overlook is that marketing side. You've got to have author blurbs, get reviews out, send review copies out, because while it's slow to add up, it does matter over time, especially as more and more they snowball. That's the whole thing to marketing, is that, okay, maybe you're not able to get Daniel Green with 1 million subscribers on YouTube to pick up your book, but you can absolutely get a YouTuber with 500 or 1,000 to give it a look. And some other YouTuber of a similar size will pick it up. Or maybe someone reads a review on Goodreads, so they see a blurb from an author they like. It's something so many small press and independent authors miss, and I think it's, especially moving forward, maybe the most important element to making sure you grow yourself and your brand. Even a lot of trad publishers overlook it.
yes, I will say marketing tends to be the most emotionally demanding part of my job. And the editorial does tend to be the most expensive.
I mean, I am literally the marketing guy, and it consumes hours faster than anyone will know, and a lot of it never pays off. Like, you can send out 100 review requests in a day and get a response on maybe one of them. And some days it does feel like you're punching a wall. But here's the thing, only way that wall comes down is if you keep punching at it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the reasons why I think marketing guys are, for better or worse, still going to have a place in future publishing. I mean, better in my case, certainly.
Yeah, if there's any part of the book process, I think that if you are not as successful as a writer yourself, that's something that if you like, I think it was Rob Creasy that says that like the biggest kind of secret that's not secret in publishing is that doing other things in publishing will get you more money than publishing. And that's a good area to a lot more people are looking for. I've seen a lot of, we'll run your ads, we'll take care of your promo. You have a lot more marketing kind of agencies popping up around the book industry nowadays.
Hey friends, quick personal note before we continue. I have started a GoFundMe to raise $2,500 to visit the woman I love, Annabelle, in the Philippines. And yeah, as any true weeb, I live up to all the stereotypes. But seriously, guys, she's incredible. Anne takes care of her mom full-time, who has Alzheimer's. And Anne is always so good to me. Over time, we've built a deep and beautiful connection. My goal is to be there in time for her birthday this September, but I need your help to make it happen. I know this community has my back, so if you believe in love, second chances, or just want to be part of something hopeful, please check us out on GoFundMe. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much. And all right, let's get back to it. Yeah, John Del Rose, who is a bit of a controversial figure sometimes, he's been on the show before. He has made this point several times to me and others that, the writing side of publishing today is that's only the first step. And what determines the success of the project, at least in terms of sales, and if people are talking about, is everything else. And unfortunately, we're just no longer in those days of just do a really great job writing, your book, and then just lean on the publisher, and that's enough. And we're just so far gone from all of that.
With respect to John, I very much disagree. The most important part of publishing, A, B, C, D through Z, is making sure you put out the very best book that you can. Sure, Twilight and a lot of really bad paranormal romance gets all the TikTokers in a buzz. But 10 years, no one's going to remember 90% of them. For comparison, part of the reason I still push Howard Andrew Jones and his Hanover books is you can tell on every single page that man poured his blood, sweat, tears, and soul into every word. That book, when I was reading it for potential acquisition, made me laugh, made me smile, made me cheer, and made me cry. It was the first thing I read to my son when he was born. You can't say that for a book where the marketing plan was the first thing you drew up, or something you put into ChatGPT to crap out and put out into the swill.
Yeah, so there are a lot more people that are trying to build their book into the marketing plan now. So that's a good point to bring up.
And that can be done, but one of the reasons why I had such an easy time getting reviewers and YouTubers to snowball the marketing for Howard Andrew Jones was that he had written an undeniably good book. I work in publishing PR. I've worked in public relations, and I've worked in journalism. Spin control will always exist, but the easiest way to get people to pick something up is if it's good and as if it's the truth, and you don't need to lie about it. If you have a good product, it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to sell a bad one. So foundationally, make sure your book is as good as it can be, and then worry about how to sell it.
Yes, absolutely agree.
Okay, so what about stuff that might be more interesting to my viewership here? We talk a lot about nerd culture, so science fiction, fantasy books, maybe more of their genre. Majority of my audience here are men, and of course, we've seen men leaving the world of books more than ever before. You can even look at the publishing industry, which is 73% female.
That may be generous.
Oh, did you see that article that came out yesterday about the guy who got published through 46 journals pretending to be a gender fluid Nigerian refugee?
There are multiple stories like that over the past few years, and I think it speaks to itself. The other day I read a similar article where the New Yorker has not published a single author, male author I should point out, born after 1985 or some such date.
That's wild.
So you're essentially skipping an entire gender and multiple generations of authors. And I don't care how you spin it, if you are missing an entire gender, of 40 years worth of authors, there is no natural selection going on there. You are rejecting them based on their census data.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're a damn fool for doing so. Like you mentioned, a lot of men are turning away from books, and I think that's a tragedy. But of course, I'm also a publisher. I see a business opportunity. The person who cracks the code on getting not just men to pick up books again, but children, both boys and girls, will make a mint, because that is an underserved market, not just by trad pub, but a lot of indie. Yes, there's a lot of money in romantasy right now, but there are uncatered to markets that's, for example, if I may briefly monologue,
Go for it.
I am about to launch a sword and sorcery magazine with Iron Age Media, Battleborn. A big reason why? Action fantasy, heroic fantasy, sword and sorcery, lit RPG, whatever you want to call it or brand it. People are hungry for it. There is a desire to have that back in the marketplace, both because doorstopper fantasy, I think, has had its day, and because, for a good chunk of the population, men and women, people want stories about slaying dragons, not sleeping with them. But the thing is, I'm also father to a 2-year-old boy, and I notice there isn't a lot of new fiction aimed towards that demo. I don't weep or bemoan it. I see a business opportunity. I want to create the kinds of stories that I picked up off the book stands when I was a teenager that made me want to be a writer, so that there's another generation of people who entered a field that love the history of the genre, that love to read, because that is important. Because that's ultimately the big tragedy with publishing turning away from men the way they did. They'll find their entertainment elsewhere. If they're lucky, it'll be through video games. If we're unlucky, it'll be through Andrew Tate.
No, and there's a good parallel there between like the world of comics. American Western comics have been in a decline, whereas in Eastern comics have been on the rise, whether they be manga, which is the main one, or manhwa, or any of the other variations of that.
It's a direct parallel, I'd say. And I don't mean to, again, talk CJ. I hope you can jump in after this one.
No, you're okay.
It's just comic books made the mistake in the 1990s of assuming that divorced dentists and single guys in their 30s were the only market they'd ever need to cater to again. On paper, it made sense. They have more money than kids. They can spend more money. They can buy more comics. Of course, then they discovered the flaw too late. There's only ever going to be that same demographic, growing older, growing poorer, dying off. And suddenly, the market used to cater to kids find an alternative, manga, manhwa, and you've lost them forever. It might be too late for the American comic book industry to recover. You've seen some attempts recently, I think, might right the ship. The Conan comics from Titan, phenomenal. DC has these manga-sized compact comics that have been very successful. But publishing made the same mistake about 20 years ago with YA literature, of all things. Twilight, Hunger Games, 50 Shades of Grey, that whole field, the Twilight moms were their versions of divorced dentists buying Spider-Man. And they chased that demographic to the point the average YA reader is an unmarried woman in her 30s with no kids. YA literature, by its nature, should be for kids, and it should be for both girls and boys. The fact instead that they're basically erotica with elves and dragons is sort of a tragedy, because the importance of YA literature is it keeps kids reading well into adulthood. Without that, you lose a generation of readers, to say nothing of a shrinking market share. And we need those books so that kids don't just stop reading when they turn 12, the way far too many do.
Yeah, I will say, like, as a parent of a kid that's a little older than 2. I have 2 kids, and I have a boy and a girl, it's Phobos and Deimos.
Ooh, perfect market testing.
So, I read to my kids, and my husband reads to the kids. So we've read, the first series I actually read to them was, Little House on the Prairie, and I really like those books. I understand why they got canceled a few years ago. Um, but the, like, I think that's grounding them in, like, not only, like, realism, but, like, there's family dynamics, there's also a lot of, man versus nature, there's a lot of, like, that just that more realistic, like, wholesome kind of, this is where you start type of thing.
They're amazing books.
Yeah, when we jump around, because the last series we read was, Ender's Game, so my son really liked that one. My daughter was not very as much as she was not as wild about it, but they both agree that it was a good book. The first one
It's the
anyway.
foundational book for YA for boys.
Yes, yes. So I've seen a lot more, like, we read a lot of graphic novels. The I Survived books are really good. I think it's important to, one of the things that I hate about fantasy today is that, like, people are just, like, they have no understanding of how the world works, so they base their fantastical world on a world that's not realistic already, if that makes sense. It kinda compounds the problem. Like you said, like, instead of slaying the dragons, they're sleeping with, and, like, the rich history of the archetype of the dragon was that it was this impossible obstacle that you had to overcome. Um, it, generally doesn't turn out well if you try to sleep with your problems, so just ask, that HR, specialist and the, astronomer CEO guy today, huh? So,
Uh,
what I will say,
sorry,
like,
that was
what, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, like, all of the culture that we produce is a reflection of our current culture, but it also should, like, aspire to something better, to something greater, and, um, like, you can have the satire that critiques it as much as you can have the inspirational, aspirational kind of comic like, comic storylines that go in and help people aspire to be better people. I think that's just a cultural problem in general because 'cause we're coming out of, like, the age of nihilism very, very slowly.
I mean, you're absolutely right. We need stories about heroes again, and maybe it's just because, again, coming from publishing, 10 years, Doorstoppers, Grimdark, that was the there's been a shift to romanticy recently, but that was the, by and large, flavor of fantasy for most of a generation, and I am sick to death of it. I mean, maybe just because I didn't like the finale of the Game of Thrones, but frankly, I don't care if Martin ever finishes those last 2 books, beyond the fact a lot of people are shy to pick up new series because he's never going to write those last 2 books. Which is kind of the other reason you're seeing that shift away from Doorstoppers is, people have been burned out because George Martin and Patrick Rothfuss are never gonna finish their series, and they're slow to trust a new one after that.
Yeah, there is a lot of audience abuse going on with different people. I do think there is a fundamental lack of trust in society in general too. Um, it's the compounding on with, yes, like, some social conditioning. Um, like, there's a policy in our house that we won't just, like, green light stuff if it's made after a certain year. Like, we have to sit down and watch it. Like, even the new Superman movie, like, it has swear words in it, and it's like, if you watch, like, the older ones, they don't have any swear I can't, in like, I don't like that for my kids, like, I get that people swear, but I also understand that, like, I don't want my kids to swear because people swear. I want them to, find different words.
I totally understand that. I'm
Yeah.
hope so far following it, but I'm generally having a rule that nothing is going in front of my kid before I've watched it or read it myself,
Mhm.
I mean, it's no different from what you do with food. Why would you
Right,
not be just as carefully about feeding their brain?
right. Yes, and, I do think too, like, a lot of what I kinda like as the, I like to tell people just up front, like, I'm one of those Bible thumping old ladies that'll be in the church, with the little bag of gum, you know? I like that a lot of Christian media is trying to catch up, but I think they're getting some of the wrong messages too at the same time, so I have to, uh, like, watching Phil Vischer's Twitter's timeline is depressing, so, uh, but, like, I really love that a lot more people, like Doug Tennepool is, out there. A lot more of his stuff is out there. Butch Hartman is now a Christian. He's got his new kid series of In the Garden. Looks really cute. We've got a lot of Kingstone comics here, and they do American history, which I like a lot too, as well as the Jesus series and the Bible series that they have. I've bought a lot of books from. So I like that I know where to go if I want something as a mom, and I figured most of that out. It's a lot of the secular stuff that I have to kind of parse and parle through just to find something. And I do think like the whole coming of age arc, which is probably like my specialty as a writer, is that the whole big secret to it is that you don't really ever stop growing. You either grow up or you grow out. And if you stagnate, that's actually like the first step towards death. And so you can have new interests and stuff that like branch out, but like there is a certain point, like you reach, like you said, you're tired of all the fantasy stuff and the grimdark and everything. It's like there's a point where that caps out and you need to look somewhere else for what you actually like need as a person.
This is a good jumping off point because if you look at the Amazon book data, this is kind of a secret people outside of the world of publishing don't understand. The New York Times booksellers list, all that stuff, rubbish. It means nothing. It's editorialized. It's useless. Don't believe it. But Amazon, they release every year their book sales data. And from 2024 sales, some interesting things pop out. For example, in 2020, the majority of books that were politically aligned were left to far left. White Fragility, Barack Obama books did really well. But 2024, we see that actually, no, the political books have taken a big shift rightward. And oddly enough, also there's been a big jump in religious books. So there is a shift happening in the culture right now. And I am curious to see where that goes. I wonder sometimes if this is a shift rightward or if it's a shift where just more people are choosing not to be political. But
it's actually a shift upward, I would argue. So
I would agree with that. I mean, you first, CJ, though.
Okay. No, ever since 9/11, I don't think a lot of people have. I always bring up 9/11, so I'm sorry. But like, like I lived through it. I was a teenager. I remember the first 6 months after it. And then when people talk about today's divide in politics, I usually trace it to about that era because the millennials right now are pretty much we're like the Prince William of the reigning generation, I guess. And half of us said, all these jihadis attacked us and killed like 3,000 people. What did we do to deserve it? And the other half said, like, all these jihadis came and they killed 3,000 people of us. That's terrible. We need to go to war. And when people talk about all this kind of, like, before this, you had the new atheist movement, and you had there's a big, with the rise of technology, there's a further divide between like traditional values. There's elongated childhood as your internet archive grows. There's a lot more entertainment options preventing, procreation and family development. There's a lot of mobility as far as like jobs go and education opportunities. You've seen so many radical changes in such a generation that it's hard not to be like, of course something has changed. But I think a lot of people are starting to realize like the negative effects of all of that. You have war, you have social conventions that are changed, you have more political movements, you have a lot more media, you have a lot more like I said, you have like an entire archive of the past like 100 years of film and TV shows and everything. And yes, you can visit a nice pirate man to see some of those if you need to. There's going to be a lot of temptation for that, as the new entertainment doesn't speak to like your current mood.
I mean, increasingly, you don't need to. The
Yeah.
public domain is finally growing again for the first time in decades.
Yes. I would argue that Winnie the Pooh taking a killer turn wasn't to everybody's taste.
Yeah, one of my pet conspiracy theories is that Disney funded that movie just to make sure somebody doesn't greenlight new Winnie the Pooh books and cartoons people actually want.
Oh, well, I mean, that's a good conspiracy theory. I like the sound of it. Um,
But
the,
kind of to
yeah,
you first, please.
I was just gonna finish up and say, yes, I do think people are starting to realize the failure that has come with cutting off an entire generation from all of those former things, and we're starting to make an upward climb back to trying to get some sense of normalcy and meaning.
Well, sort of like CJ, I sort of see upward as the trend, both in terms of people want heroic or optimistic stories and the fact we're seeing progress on interesting fronts. Science fiction and fantasy as a genre within the United States are both celebrating their centennial for the most part next year.
Mhm.
Likewise, some of the foundational works of those genres are within the next few years going to be entering the public domain. Superman, Batman, Conan the Barbarian, the entire bibliographies of work from authors like Robert E. Howard. That's going to give access to a whole new generation in a scope. Just think of how Sherlock Holmes or Cthulhu or all of those works are repeatedly tapped throughout pop culture because they are the collective resource of everybody. And we're about to see a massive expansion just beyond terrible horror movies starring Popeye or Mickey Mouse. But likewise, the flavor of fantasy I see people pursuing beyond romantasy is increasingly heroic.
We're seeing a resurgence of sword and sorcery, which
Truthfully,
sort of ebbs and flows with how good things are in America. Its last peak of popularity was in the 1970s for a reason.
and then before that in the 1930s during the Depression. So, grim times ahead, but at least we're going to get some damn fine action fantasy over the next few years. And I hope a lot of it will be in the pages of Battleborn. But we have, like you said, a century of material to look through, which is, I think, another thing starting to impact movie performance, publishing sales. That you don't need to consume the terrible Marvel movie that was phoned in and cost the price of a space shuttle when you've got the entire filmography of Humphrey Bogart to work through.
Mhm.
Or, as Peter pointed out, the New York Times bestseller list, everybody has known that has been fake since the 70s. The author of The Exorcist took into the Supreme Court over it. The fact that nobody seems to know that off the top of their heads is a marketing miracle on part of the New York Times bestseller list. But conversely, you see Slop sort of impacting Amazon sales rankings. Again, Island Sword and Sorcery Man. Next time you're on Amazon, look at the top 100 works of sword and sorcery, and you will not find a single work of sword and sorcery among those rankings. Not Michael Moorcock, not Robert E. Howard, not C.S. Lewis, just a whole bunch of books from outside the subgenre, because Amazon does not police those rankings, and sometimes puts their thumbs on the scales when they can get away with it.
Yes, I know they have had some updates lately to their rankings and how they adjust them periodically. They don't try to do it in real time, and they're looking for more longevity in terms of sales now. So hopefully that'll get some of it shifted out, but I don't know.
Knock on wood, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, it is very much like the New York Times in its own way, where it's own company, and you know, even as a public service, I imagine that they think that they're doing us a favor by putting their thumbs in places where they don't belong.
For better or worse, Amazon is a 900-pound gorilla, and while sometimes it leads to funny things like Sarah J. Maas being a best-selling author of, according to Amazon, Christian fiction,
Yes, I hate that.
mo- most of the rest of the time it leads to the realization that if Jeff Bezos wakes up on the wrong side of the bed tomorrow, he could do to the publishing industry what Hiroshima happened to with the atomic bomb.
Yeah, I do see a lot more independent authors, for what it's worth, myself included, starting to put more of their work for sale on their websites, their own websites, and try to drive traffic that way. I can only hope that more marketing will be available for help for that, just because, like I said, but the other side of it too is, like, you have to earn your audience trust, and I don't think that's something that people are willing to give up very easily these days because we've been burned and because we've been lied to and because we've been promised these things that aren't actually coming to be. So, I get disillusionment, but that is part of the coming of age kind of cycle where you have this idealized version of something, you get disillusioned by it, and then good heroic fiction, like I feel like is the heart of a redemptive kind of Christ-driven story anyway. You become a redeemed idealist. So, uh if you don't give in to despair. So, that's still a choice.
Yeah, and of course, there are parts of this conversation that we kind of have an idea of the known unknowns, but the unknown unknowns. Maybe we'll have something what happened in news in 2023, which was the HCU update, and Google has just been more than decimating the news industry. So you're right. So I don't know if tomorrow Amazon all of a sudden just changes everything, and they're like, no, we are only publishing now Amazon approved books by Amazon. All of you other people, you're out of luck. We want all the money. Gimme, gimme, gimme. That's basically what happened with Google.
Thanks for helping us kill bookstores.
Yeah.
Don't collect money on your way out.
Yeah. Oh, well, there is a reason that I like having physical copies of my books, although, like, I've only started recently buying them again because I have had young children and explaining to them that, like, hey, you don't touch mommy's books is. I remember I used to be a professor, and I remember one day I came home and my entire book I was supposed to teach at is just covered in Sharpie. And I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of vintage books on my bookshelves, and my nightmare is coming home to find them covered in crayon.
Oh, crayon comes out a lot better than Sharpie, so it's just a heads up.
You guys are giving me book PTSD. We're gonna start wrapping this up, guys. Thank you both to see CJ here and Shaun. Are you guys, so is it fair to say you guys are more optimistic about the future or pessimistic about the future? You go first, Shaun.
I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in the 3rd grade, and I read J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time. That, and I found out my grandmother had written books herself. That was the moment books became real and not just something that magically appeared on your bookshelves. I'm very lucky that I grew up loving books, idolizing authors, and after a few years in the Army and in journalism, becoming friends with many of the people and authors I idolized. I've worked in publishing. I've seen some magnificent books through and published a few myself. Maybe the next few years will be the downfall. Maybe AI and romantasy will sweep clear the entire field of fantasy, and these are the last twilight years of authors putting out the kind of stuff I grew up with. So be it. I'll fight against the dying of the light to my last breath. If this be Ragnarok, call me Thor, and I will fight Fenrir with pride. But I don't think it is. I mean, like I said, I am putting my own skin in the game, launching a sword and sorcery magazine, the kind of thing that once upon a time I would have walked into a bookstore and loved to pick up off the shelf because I got a 2-year-old and there is nothing he loves more than picking books off the shelves and trying to read them or getting mom and dad to read them.
Mhm.
People love stories. They love tales of heroism, daring do, of comedy, of triumph. That's fundamentally human, and no AI, no publishing industry incompetence, not Jeff Bezos, and not romantasy will ever slay that. So long as I've got breath, I'll be an author, and I hope anyone else with that dream of telling stories to others will too.
All right. CJ, final words.
Oh, it's hard to follow that. So,
No pressure.
I think, yeah, I think I'm more optimistic about my own chances of publishing. As far as the industry goes, like the industry will do what it does regardless of what I do or not. So I don't think it's the smart thing to just give up. Um, like every book I've ever read is still running around in my heart and my mind somewhere, and I love that. I love that I can give those things to my kids, and I can give them something better. And when I'm dead and like rotting in my grave, or my ashes are strewn to the wind here, my kids can go to my books and they'll still find my voice, and they can pass that on to their kids. And that's a lovely gift, I think, that I can give my kids. And that's more what I would love to do for them. It's there's a very different thing to when you're going into a war. There's a very different thing between surrendering and losing the battle. I will probably lose the battle, but I'm gonna go fight anyway, just like Shaun here. So we have a legacy, and we're gonna do our best to fight for it. So
I will happily be with you in the trenches, CJ.
All righty. Well, thank you both of you for taking the time to come on the show today. I enjoyed speaking with both of you. Please, audience, if you liked what you heard today, please check out Shaun's work over at Iron Age Media, and of course, C.S. Johnson's work across her different independent books and comics. And we'll provide links and images of those here. Now, finishing this up, thank you all of you for taking the time to watch CultureScape today. Thank you to my editor, Chris Holowicki, for making me look way more competent than I actually am. And of course, all
me
of
too.
you. And so until next time, my friends, keep geeking out. Hey there, gang! If you are a fan of CultureScape, and I know you are, and want to get involved in supporting the show, well, now you can! By joining the CultureScape Patreon, you'll help support me and my editor Chris as we create the show and produce more quality journalism. For just $5 or $10 a month, you not only help us, but get access to our exclusive members-only Discord. You'll also get to vote on and suggest new guests for the interview. So if you are a fellow weeb and love CultureScape, then come join us today on Patreon.